One of the really interesting things about attachment research is this concept of earned secure attachment. So what that means is for a child who does not have a secure attachment to a person in their household, right, that they live with, someone else, another adult in their world, can fill that void, and that's called earned secure attachment. So another adult in the child's world, which in our case is educators or us as teachers, we can take steps to build a secure, trusting, mutually respectful relationship with that child, which in that sense teaches the child that there are people in the world that you can trust, that you can feel safe with, that you can be comfortable with. And it might not be that primary caregiver. It could be a relative, but in our case as educators, we can fill that void for a child. So the challenge becomes, how do you build that trust between an educator and a child? So from the educator perspective is where that sense of belonging comes into play. If you have children coming into your classroom who don't have that secure attachment, one way to help them feel connected to you and to help work on breaking down some of those barriers to build a strong relationship is to look at your physical environment. What's the mood? What's the tone that you are creating in the classroom? What do children see when they walk in the door? What do they hear all around, in the classroom? Is there soft music playing, or is it quiet? Is it a lot of chatter? What do you see on the walls? When I walk into this space, do I feel like I belong? Or do I see images that reflect me, reflect my culture, reflect who I am, the things that I like? Do I see that reflected on the walls in the classroom? How are the desks and tables arranged? Are they arranged in a way that I feel comfortable taking a risk? Because for learning to happen, children need to be willing to take risks and make mistakes, is if they trust the adult in the classroom. Well, how do you build that trust? It goes back to creating that attachment, relationship, which then begs the question of, what's the sense of belonging when I walk into the classroom? Does the teacher in the room get me and who I am when I walk into the room?
This is good. So I'm hearing that as, okay, these are some of the things, the sense of belonging. Do I see myself and not just the walls? I think sometimes teachers with the best intentions will stop there. Oh, we'll put Dr. King on the wall and Rosa Parks and Cesar Chavez, and then we're good to go, right? But there's so much more. Or we'll do a festival, we'll do a little international, once a year. We'll celebrate this once or twice a year. And that's as far as it goes. But I heard also in the content that we're presenting, also in just when I come into this space, do I feel like this is a welcoming space in which I can be myself, like full on be myself, whatever my identity is or identities are. I'm able to do that, and I'm not expected to behave as my teacher views me as I'm supposed to behave. Is that what I heard?
Absolutely. And it also goes to, are there spaces in the room where I can get away from sometimes the chaos that occurs in our classrooms? Is there a space in the room if I can't sit any longer and I need to feel like I need to move, I need to bounce, I need to touch something without disturbing, the other children or getting in the way of other activities that are happening? So it's much more than just the, what you see on the walls. It's the books that we use, like you said, some of the content, the materials, the types of questions that we ask, the amount of wait time that we give, the balance of who has a turn to speak and share and, ask questions or respond to questions.
Okay, so here's my next question, because that sounds like a perfect classroom to me, Randy, in a perfect world. But here's the thing. Well, I guess I'm going to assume that everybody that's listening to this episode right now has the best intentions, but I could imagine there are some unintentional things that educators might do that might cause the disorganized or those insecure type of attachments. Could you maybe share some examples? And again, unintentional, just things that we might do or we're not considering that could contribute to the students not having that secure attachment.
Absolutely. So some of the things to think about that are unintentional on our part are the sounds, the noise in the classroom environment. So for a child who experiences a lot of loud noises at home that are unsettling, sudden noises, loud noises, even the fire alarm that goes off, right? That's out of our control. But loud noises, the tone of voice that we use when we are speaking. Sometimes, we're trying to keep children safe and we might yell across the room to get someone's attention, a child's attention, so they're not hurting themselves or hurting someone else. But that act of yelling might trigger a different child, like not involved in that action, might trigger a different child who their home life, all they hear is yelling and fighting. And just the sound of your voice, that raising your voice, can interfere with that child feeling safe and secure. It could be things that we might think of as nurturing, being physically close to a child who is not ready to have an adult that they don't yet trust stand physically close to them. Sometimes we might put a gentle hand on a child's shoulder just to kind of calm them down or get their attention. And a touch for a child who is not expecting it and doesn't see you coming. Sometimes we walk behind a student and might put a hand on a shoulder. If they're not expecting that and they are not currently in a secure attachment place, that can be very jarring and startling and creates more of a boundary than it does. Our intention was to be soft and gentle, but for this particular child, soft and gentle when they're not expecting it is not going to be supportive of what they need to build a trusting relationship.
Can you give me a little more about I want to clarify about the loud noise, because I think of teachers that have projects going on or have various activities where students are working in pairs, groups, small groups, things like that. There's a lot of things going on. Maybe they have a classroom setup where there's multiple stations. And so I know some teachers prefer, I don't want to have a silent classroom. And so I want to make sure I clarify. Can you clarify, what do you mean by loud noises?
A loud noise would be something unexpected. So busy, active classrooms are noisy, right?
Right.
Children are getting up and down, they're moving around the room, they're, something, materials move and things clatter. So the example that I gave was yelling across the room instead of getting up and walking across the room to use a softer voice. So it's an escalation in the sound of the adult voice that isn't expected. It's an unexpected sound for the child. That everything, there's that, it could be high level of noise in the room, but when you hear one voice and it's the adult voice that all of a sudden peaks above the rest of the volume, that's jarring. It could even be, sometimes we do things unintentionally where we are trying to put a stack of books on a table and they drop, and it's a startling noise because, again, it's an unexpected loud noise that's not part of the ongoing, just regular chatter that you might be hearing in the classroom.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. I'm glad that you brought up and you know what? Sometimes this is in folks' 504 plans, loud noises, things like that. And I always recommend teachers, make sure if students have IEPs, 504 plans, make sure you read them, because they can be very helpful for our students as we're trying to make sure that they're successful. One of the things, the overarching theme that I've heard, especially when we were talking about disorganized and insecure areas of attachment, is considering home life and how that might impacts students at school. I mean, it's Maslow, I believe. Father Abraham always liked to say, he talked about the hierarchy of needs and our basic needs of feeling secure. And I think at the end of the day, that is what we want to strive for, is ensuring that our students feel secure. And I think one of the examples that you gave in regards to just touching someone on the shoulder, I've seen teachers make this mistake with the best intention, just trying to coax their students in the, hey, come on in the class, it's time to start, and not meaning anything by it, putting their hand on the shoulder, and that triggers some experience that a child had. So are we suggesting that we do not, as loving as we are, that we try to restrain some of that love until we have a better understanding of what's acceptable for a student?
I wouldn't say restrain.
Okay, is that too harsh? I couldn't think of another word.
I think one of the things that we need to be conscious of, okay, particularly in the very beginning of the year, when we're getting to know the students that we have in the room with us, is how do they respond? Mm-hmm. How do they like to engage? And so part of that is from the get-go, whether it's back to school, meet the teacher, whether it's even just happening on the first day, the first couple of days of school, is trying to get a sense of how each child interacts with other children. If you have the opportunity to observe a child interacting with an adult that's bringing them to school, that kind of helps give you a sense of how comfortable they are with physical touch. Physical touch, I think, is one of the things it's a very fine line between being nurturing and being cautious ourselves, not wanting to be accused of putting hands on a child that was never our intent. But it's also kind of giving the children a sense of, here's how I express myself. If that's not comfortable for you, it's okay to say, I don't like to be touched. Okay. And giving children that permission to say, please don't touch me. It's hard for children to tell adults what they like and what they don't like, more so than what they do like, because no matter what we do, there is a power dynamic between adults and children. And the adults are the ones perceived to have all of the power and the control. So we as adults have to give that permission to children to say, I don't like that. And for the children to know when they express what they do or don't like, what they don't want us to do, we need to acknowledge that and value it and thank them for giving us that insight. Tell me what would help you feel more comfortable. Show me what you like or what you don't like. And that way we can adapt how we engage with each child so that we're meeting their needs rather than trying to have them fit who we are and what's comfortable for us.
Okay. And I have another question. Are you familiar with like love languages?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Because when I was doing the attachment theory, I was doing a lot of research on that. I was also looking at love languages and then tying all of that in a sense of belonging. And I feel like there's a lot of relations between the three, because if, again, I want my students to have a secure attachment, it might be helpful, going back to the physical touch piece, it might be helpful to understand what is a student's love language, if you will, or how do they prefer? Do they prefer rewards? Do they prefer just words of affirmation? Do they prefer acts of service? Do you believe, or what are your thoughts rather, on the connection between sense of belonging, attachment theory, and what are we talking about? What's the other one? Oh, and love languages and love languages.
The connection between the three.
Yeah.
So going back to looking at the sense of belonging, if we start by creating a space that looks and feels welcoming and accepting of the children that live in that classroom, within that physical space, we can give children options for the love language piece of it. What connects to you? Do you like holding a stuffed animal? Do you prefer holding a stress ball, right? Something that you can squeeze? Do you like sitting on a hard chair? Do you prefer sitting on the floor? Do you prefer standing up? Those are the kinds of things that will help kind of with that love language. Would you rather draw? Would you rather write? Or would you rather paint? Would you rather build something in terms of how we communicate and share knowledge and, our understanding of what we know and understand, children giving us that sense of, here's how I can best express to you as the adult what I know about this topic. Here's how I can best express to you how I build relationships. When I play with my friends, I like to sit next to them. When I play with my friends, I like to sit across from them. Those are the kinds of things that I think build into that sense of belonging, help to create the trust, which is what we need to build that secure attachment, and then gives the child that option to use their love language to express themselves.
And I tell you what, you just brought some fire just now. I love how you were able to relate all that together. And listen, I've enjoyed this conversation because it's really got me thinking. Like I said, I looked into this about a year ago and I hadn't really looked into it since as I was moving through the book. But it's really good to engage in this conversation and not forget the importance of understanding attachment theory. And again, not from just the toddler side of things, attachment in the caregiving, but we are caregivers. We're mandatory reporters. Like, this is very important. This is something that we should be doing and that we should also be discussing post toddler area. So whether you're an 11th grade teacher, 12th grade teacher, even adults you're teaching at the higher ed level, these are very important attachment information. I'd love for you to share any final words of advice that you would love to give to our listeners, anything that we haven't touched on already.
I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that, as educators, we get so much thrown at us and we wear so many different hats besides just being an educator. We're therapists, we're the cleaning crew, we do all of these, we serve all of these different roles when we work with our students. And it's really important to keep in mind that no matter how many different types of strategies are thrown at us, whether it's SEL, whether it's trauma sensitive classroom practices, everything starts from a foundation of trust. And that's that whole secure attachment component. And so if we can stay focused on having a trusting, nurturing relationship with our students, it makes all of those other types of strategies that are thrown on our plates make more sense, because you can't have trauma sensitive classroom practices. You can't, employ, social emotional learning without first creating a sense of trust and a sense of belonging, both between the adult and child, and then in that classroom overall. None of those other strategies will be successful if we don't start with the trust and belonging.